Ronda Rousey is by far the biggest name women's MMA has ever produced, whose impact, not only on the sport, but on culture as a whole, is almost unrivaled, with only superstars like Conor McGregor who can even come close to entering the conversation. But increasingly, as not only the sport, but Ronda's resume ages, and new waves of dominant, well-rounded female fighters rise up through the ranks, the legitimacy of her resume, and as a result, her title run, have been called into question. So today, we'll be having a look at these claims and seeing whether or not Ronda Rousey was a legit UFC champion. Now, this will be a little different to the other videos I've done in this series, as unlike the other fighters I've previously covered, Ronda didn't win her belt under controversial circumstances, nor did she lose it before she had even defended it. In fact, she still holds the record for most consecutive defenses of a woman's title. So instead, we'll be taking a look at her opponents and their quality. Like all the other videos in this series, this isn't a biography, we'll only be covering the relevant title material. However, in Ronda's case, it does make up the majority of her career. Anyway, without any further ado, Ronda Rousey, shortly before making her MMA debut, was coming off a successful judo career, culminating in her capturing of the bronze medal at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. 2 years later, she would make her MMA debut on August the 6th of 2010. She would win in the first 23 seconds via armbar, and that would be just a little sign of what was to come. Over the next 6 months, Ronda would rack up 2 more amateur first-round armbar finishes before turning pro in March of 2011. After going 4-0 as a pro, all of her wins coming in under a minute by armbar, including a victory over Julia Budd, she would find herself facing off against Miesha Tate for the Strikeforce Bantamweight Championship. Ronda would again win this fight by first-round armbar, famously and gruesomely breaking Miesha's arm in the process. She would defend her Strikeforce belt just one time against Sarah Kaufman, again winning in a sub-minute armbar before Strikeforce would merge with the UFC and Ronda's Strikeforce title would transfer over, making her the inaugural UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion and the first women's champion in UFC history. Ronda would go on to defend her bantamweight strap 6 times against Liz Carmouche, Miesha Tate, Sarah McMahon, Alexis Davis, Kat Zingano, and Bethe Correia, racking up more armbars and 3 KO finishes before the infamous clash with Holly Holm at UFC 193. Now, I'm sure everyone is well aware of the celebrity surrounding Ronda headed into a fight with Holly Holm. Ronda was on top of the world. She was on the cover of every magazine, she was appearing in Entourage, having films built around her, and even in talks of a prospective intergender boxing match against Floyd Mayweather. At this stage, prior to McGregor's win at UFC 194, Ronda was arguably the biggest star. Unfortunately for Ronda, this exacerbated fame would also prove to be her greatest undoing. That Holly Holm fight, if you're a Ronda fan, that wasn't pretty. It was nothing short of domination. Holly would light Ronda up the brief duration of the bout, shrugging off any attempt at grappling and retaining perfect composure, slipping, dodging and countering what little resistance Ronda was able to offer up on the feet, before ending the fight with the head kick that would be heard around the world. And with that, Ronda's championship career would come to an end. Rousey would fight only one more time in MMA, challenging current champion and women's GOAT Amanda Nunes at UFC 207. In the one UFC event I have been lucky enough to witness live, Ronda, in a complete twist of fate and in an ironic counter to the dominance of her earlier career, would find herself stopped by strikes within the first minute of the main event, and with it, a once triumphant MMA career would end, not with a bang, but with a roar from a Brazilian lioness. Now usually this is where I'd call back to the question at the start of the video, but as I stated before, Ronda's case is different, so before we do that, we have to look at the quality of her wins. I'll stop quickly by saying, if you're enjoying the video so far, please consider liking and subscribing guys, it really helps the channel more than I can say whenever you do. Anyway, since Ronda's retirement and move over to the WWE, people have begun to discredit Ronda's career and her record, and for what on the surface I believe to be very fair reasons. Her exit and handling of the MMA media since has been nothing short of horrendous, spiteful at worst and prima donna at best. However, we should try not to let that cloud our judgment, when the main detraction, which again is fair, is that she was a champion in a forming division. I would accept that, and I do accept that. I mean, to quote Joe Rogan, no one was on her level until they were. but I don't think that necessarily devalues her resume at all. Let me preface this by saying, I'm generally a Ronda detractor, okay? However, I feel like that argument kind of falls short. I mean, she was by no means an old champion when she lost her belt, at only 28 years of age, and only 25 when she was promoted to be the UFC champion. I would argue women's MMA was more developed at the time of Ronda's emergence than she was. Sure, the UFC rankings were still working themselves out, so she may not have necessarily fought the best every time, but her resume still aged incredibly well. From Julia Budd, who would go on to dominate the Bellator featherweight division until the arrival of Chris Cyborg, her 2 wins over Miesha Tate, the woman who would go on to defeat Holly Holm and capture the belt in Ronda's absence, Sarah McMahon, who would remain a perennial contender to this day and is always a threat, and Kat Zingano, owner of a win over current champion Amanda Nunes, and a girl who, let's face it, is always 1 win away from a title shot. However, honestly, just going through that alone, I think we've answered the question at the start of this video. Was Ronda Rousey a legit champion? I say yes. Her last 2 losses were rough, don't get me wrong, I get that, I really do. However, I don't think you can hold that alongside her attitude against her when we're strictly looking at resumes. Ronda is still the gold standard as far as women's MMA goes. If we're being honest here, how do you think Ronda would do these days? I mean, let me know in the comments, but say her celebrity hadn't ballooned as big and as fast, and she had followed the route so many fallen champions before her, and decided to carry on fighting long past her title aspirations. I mean, I truly believed had Ronda kept fighting, or should she return today, she could still remain a top 5 threat and always be a perennial contender. However, with a legacy more valuable than most, would she ever return to tarnish it? I will leave it here, as I've gone on for far longer than I like to in these videos, but be sure to let me know if you guys prefer the slightly longer video, and if you'd prefer me to flesh these out more in the future. Let me know what you think of Ronda's title reign in the comments, and like and sub if you enjoyed it, guys. Thanks, and I'll catch you on the next one.